Hello. Hello.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back from the break. I would like to quickly introduce the session. It's how do we make energy transition gender responsive? And it is my honor and pleasure to introduce the moderator for the session, Mr. Toru Kubo. He's a senior director of the Climate Change, Resilience, and Environment Cluster of the Climate Change and Sustainable Development Department of ADB. Mr. Toru is an outstanding expert which brings wealth of experience in the area of energy and climate change. And not only that, he's also a visionary, which is why his role to considerably support gender mainstreaming in energy and climate change comes so naturally. Over to you, Toru.
Thank you, Rangina. That's very generous of you. And such an honor to be introduced by you. We worked so much together on ensuring that just energy transition is gender inclusive. So good morning to everyone. Welcome again to ADB. I know some of you are trickling back from coffee, tea, and snacks. I hope you enjoyed that first session. Thanks to Suzanne and the excellent panel. I had many takeaways, but one was forward. I really like that on forward with W in the middle, with women as agents of change. It's really important to understand that climate is not gender neutral. There are uneven, different sort of impacts on women and children most vulnerable. But let's switch that to opportunities, right? There are many opportunities. Women can be agents to drive this transition. So we have a fantastic panel here for session 2. Now, the first session I think we had, and the keynote speaker, we heard about sort of the general what's happening in climate and actions, what's needed sort of national level. Here in this session, we're going to talk about case studies, right? Because you're interested in hearing how people have actually put this in practice. So we're going to talk about real cases, starting from national strategy from Ibu Filda for Indonesia. We're going to talk about a very large state-owned enterprise. I think you heard from our Director General, Vinny, in the earlier session about the SOE reform in Indonesia. So how going in a large power utility. We're going to talk about indigenous people and women indigenous peoples groups. And then we're going to talk about finance, climate finance. How do we bring that into the global architecture and decision making? And then very importantly, youth. How do we involve youth and young women agents of change in this process? So we're going to go to the first speaker, Dr. Filda Chitra Yusgiantoro. You have the full bios on the web page, so I won't go through them. They're very extensive. You can see the richness of the panel, but she's a chairperson of the PYC, the Purnomo Yugiantoro Center. She's a board member at the Climate Work Center and advisory board member for chemical engineering and petroleum engineering at IDB, the Institute of Technology of Bandung, and she's been involved in numerous research and advisory related to energy transition related areas. So she's going to share with us a case study on investing in women's human capital development to accelerate the transition to net zero. So over to you, Ibu Filda.
Thank you, Toru. Thank you for having me in this prestigious forum. I will talk about the women's human capital development to accelerate the transition to net zero. You can put up my slide here. Okay. So the human capital development is very vital to accelerate the energy transition. and woman is going to be part of this development. But first, we need to understand the overall view, the current status of our human capital development and the progress of the energy transition. As you can see here in the slides, that the human capital development can be measured by indexes such as Human Development Index and also Human Capital Index. We provide only for Asian member countries here and also including the Indonesia. These indexes reflect the knowledge and skills of the population and overall well-being, including education, health, income, and social inclusion, which play an important role in a country's economic development. In 2021, the measurement of the HDI and HCI for the Asian member countries, most of the Asian member countries, are relatively low compared to the world's average. In a particular case in Indonesia, the HDI in Indonesia is still 0.705, which is below on the world's average of 0.737. And if we see the Human Capital Index is only 0.54, still below from the Asian member countries. The highest Human Development Index and highest Human Capital Index here is only Singapore. If we see Singapore, Singapore has already implemented policy that is related to green jobs, such as skills development and social protection, which are not found in most Asian member countries. By focusing on green jobs is closely to tied closely to the sustainability and also environmental responsibility that will enhance the growth of economic in the country. Next slide, please. Talking about energy transition, well, we also talk more about renewable energy. Asian countries have significant potential of renewable energy, especially the solar from the sun. Besides solar, there is also potential of capacity in geothermal energy, especially in Indonesia, Vietnam, and Philippines. Besides geothermal energy, there is also huge potential from hydropower. If we see countries with many rivers flowing, there's a huge potential of making it in hydropower. And we see that in Indonesia and also in Myanmar as the top contenders. And bioenergy, this is specifically maybe in the rural area that we have seen a lot of maybe waste, animals waste, and so on. There's also potential, and this the top country is from Indonesia and Thailand. But the renewable energy has not been optimized yet in this region, especially if we talk about ocean surrounding the Asian member countries. There are lots of oceans. So ocean energy is also a potential that needs to be optimized as well. So this relation between the human capital development and energy transition is very close. If we increase the human capital development driven by policy readiness on green jobs, for example, it will boost expertise in technology, in green technologies, and also sustainability practice that can accelerate energy transition. Next slide. What are the recommendations? How can women contribute human capital development to accelerate the energy transition? Women who work in government should implement supportive policies to create a conducive environment for the green job market. Women who work in private sectors, banks, or investment companies should increase both foreign and also domestic investment in renewable energy projects. And then women who work as engineers, scientists, or researchers should acknowledge the technological advancements, including renewable energy technologies. We can see that energy storage solutions are the future right now for renewable energy and also green building technologies. Women who work as entrepreneurs should create market demand by job creation on renewable energy projects while addressing the environmental concerns. And lastly, women who work as academicians should focus on preparing the educational system to effectively support energy transition. So that comes to the conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that overview, Ibu Filda. And I think the way you organize it is very helpful for the panel going forward on that. Let's go to Ibu Kam. Are you online? Can you hear us?
Yes, Pak Taruk, I can hear you clearly.
Ibu Kamya?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you. Great, thank you so much. You have a challenge. Your work is cut out. I think we heard from Ibu Filda on the framework and work that's been going on in Indonesia and other ASEAN countries. But you have been working with PLN on the gender transformation, among others, climate and sustainability. Let me introduce Ibu Kamya. So she is the Executive Vice President for sustainability and energy transition at PLN. And she plays a very key part in formulating PLN strategies, including the zero emissions roadmap and launching TCFD. How many of you are familiar with TCFD here? Okay, Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. It's a really emerging field on reporting. And then, of course, on PLN's gender mainstreaming activities and roadmap. So Ibu Kamya will present us on PLN's case. Over to you, Ibu Kamya, the PLN's journey towards gender diversity and inclusion. It's been a great honor and privilege for ADB to support your efforts, but if you can share the examples and lessons learned with us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pak Torun, for the nice introductions. Thank you also for having me here in this very important forum. If we can look at the slide. So I would like to start with introducing PLN. We are end-to-end electricity company. Next slide, please. Yeah, we have been powering Indonesia for about 78 years, and ADB has been playing a key part in our journey on powering Indonesia. Next slide. If we can go to the next slide, please. So if we talk about gender, yes, it's already, yeah, I can see the slide now, moving. So gender equality is mainstream in PLN. Can we go back to the previous slide? So we put gender in our policies, manuals, and also in our KPIs. So not only in terms of policy, in terms of policy, our CEO has publicly announced our support for women equality and put it as part of the UN Global Compact. And then we also—
Slide 5, please. If we can go back one slide, slide 5.
And we also have segment of corporate intents on gender mainstreaming. And currently, we actually preparing the directive from BOD on sustainability, which is of course part of this directive. Will be talk also about gender, but not only we have a dedicated policies on gender, but we also put an obligatory for each policy to be published from every business process owner to put also statement about compliance with ESG, environmental, social, and governance, also with the gender mainstreaming. And to be able to track our progress on gender equality, of course, we have to put it in key performance indicators, both internally, like internal between PLN groups and our subholdings and also subsidiaries and units, but also in our corporate KPIs that we have to be responsible with to our shareholders. Next slide, please. So in the next
Yeah.
slide, I haven't seen it in my, okay, now I see it. So here we also showcase some projects that we put together with our financiers, with the World Bank, with ADB, to put some indicators that has to be met or has to be attained during the project implementations. For example, we have to increase the numbers of women staff, and also the training that minimum has to involve women in the training, especially on new technology, including renewable energy technologies. And currently we are actually developing gender academy. So this will be part of the corporate university. In this corporate university, we have different academies. For example, we have renewable academies, we have health, safety, security, and environment academies. And now in 14th December, in our Sustainability Day this year, we will also launch the Gender Academy, which will focus on increasing capabilities of PLN employees regarding on the issues on gender. If we go to the next slide. So of course, there are still many rooms for improvement for PLN. So we will start with doing the benchmark with other organizations, including ADB. We have heard some very good example from Ibu Veronica last time when she visited to PLN. And also we will do other benchmark with other organizations who also have implements very advanced gender practices. And then we will prepare a gender roadmap. Part of this roadmap will include also and certifications as our target for within the next 2 years. So there will be those will be conclude my presentation at these opportunities, and I welcome discussions later. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Ibu Kamya, for sharing that. It's quite moving to see PLN's evolution. Many years ago, when I was working with colleagues in Indonesia, we had been supporting Indonesia's energy sector for 5 decades, 50 years, but we did not have a single gender mainstreaming project with PLN. But thanks to Samhung and team, Veronica, Rangina, Ibu Riana's support, and champions like Ibu Kamya and Ibu Cynthia at the director level, all our projects with PLN supported by ADB are now effective gender mainstreaming. So wonderful progress, and have that gender roadmap and continuous innovation. Okay, so we will switch gears. We will now talk about indigenous peoples and indigenous peoples' women's involvement and local initiatives empowerment. So Ms. Robelida Halep is the current coordinator of the Indigenous Peoples Major Group for Sustainable Development and the Right Energy Partnership with Indigenous Peoples. She is from an indigenous group in the Philippines, from the Cordillera region in the Philippines, with Kalanguya and Kankani Indigenous Peoples Group. And she has been a strong advocate, champion in the advancement of recognition and respect of indigenous people's rights in sustainable development, and particularly ensuring a just transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. So she will share with us thoughts and transition needs to include the voices of indigenous women with examples of effective consultation processes and local initiatives. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, and good morning, everyone. So I'll start off my sharing on a very local community-led initiative, no? In a far-flung off-grid community in Malaysia, who is facing challenge on a hydropower dam. They're currently managing their own mini-grid system. And this mini-grid system was something that was empowering for the community, because the organization, it's an indigenous-led organization working on delivering mini-grid system to far-flung communities, supported them not only on technology, but also on capacity building and also on community governance, on how they're going to manage their own mini-grid systems. And this mini-grid system is not only supporting access to electricity, it's supporting education of children, and it's also supporting livelihood of indigenous women. They have solar dryers where they can dry their non-timber forest products to be processed and sold in community centers. But again, as I mentioned earlier, this community is facing a challenge of an entry of a hydropower dam that will destroy not only their ancestral lands, but also their sources of livelihood. And this story is pretty much the same with many indigenous communities in the region. These solutions to climate change that is being introduced right now, the commodification of nature, this transition to renewable energy that is extractive in nature because it encourages again further mining of minerals, nickel mining in Palawan, Philippines, which is very high in biodiversity, nickel mining in Halmahera, Indonesia, that is affecting indigenous peoples in voluntary isolation, silica mining in Malaysia. These are what governments are saying and what private sector are saying, that these are needed trade-offs to be able to achieve this net zero and this decarbonization. But what forests are you going to go to? What carbon credits are you talking about? What biodiversity credits are we talking about? If it's the same areas where these mega high power projects will be implemented, if it's the same areas where this mining and exploitation will be happening. So in the Right Energy Partnership with Indigenous peoples, one, we facilitate campaigns on highlighting concerns of Indigenous peoples and Indigenous women in this so-called just transition or transition to renewable energy. So these cases of violations on Indigenous peoples and Indigenous women. But on the other hand, we're also working in partnership. We're facilitating rights-based partnership to facilitate energy sovereignty, not just access to energy, but energy sovereignty for indigenous communities, for indigenous peoples to be able to manage their own resources, because that has, at the community level, when you support indigenous communities on access to energy, as I mentioned earlier, it supports not only their livelihood, but also their natural resource management and the defense of their territories and resources. Now, there was a point earlier on in relation to decision making. Yes, we're also pushing for the involvement of indigenous peoples and indigenous women in decision-making processes. But this is something, in terms of challenging the traditional norms, it's an internal process that indigenous communities undertake. Yes, we do need support in terms of economic empowerment, strengthening our capacities for effective governance, but it should not be an imposed process of the government or of any institution. No, it would be mechanical for indigenous communities to say 50-50. It's not a process that we undertake. No, it's an internal collective process that we undertake to form our collective governance systems to ensure that women, to ensure that youth are part of decision making, and including in grievance redress mechanism. I'm happy that the previous speaker talked about also gender responsive grievance mechanism, because this is somewhat lacking in many projects and in many programs that are being implemented in indigenous communities. So again, it's important that when we talk about just transition, as it relates to indigenous peoples, it's important that our rights, to our collective rights to land, territories, and resources is recognized, and that our right to free, prior, and informed consent is recognized. When we say right to free, prior, and informed consent, it's ensuring that projects, technologies are culturally appropriate and it adapts to the specific needs and priorities of indigenous peoples. One size fits all does not happen to us. We're quite diverse, we're quite distinct, so it's important that we recapture the specific needs and priorities, not only of indigenous peoples, but also indigenous women within the community. Because even within the community, we have our own distinct needs and priorities, and we need to give that kind of space. Now, in decision making, it's not just about numbers. We're so happy announcing 50%, 30% in leadership, but in actual, the space and the voice is not given to women and even indigenous women. So it's not about the numbers, but it's the quality of leadership we provide to women and indigenous women to be able to voice out and be able to decide on the development that they want. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robbie, for sharing that. The challenges, the real issues being faced by indigenous peoples groups, and in the context of clean energy and critical minerals, that's really evolving. It's so critical, and the whole of society just transition involving definitely the local stakeholders, indigenous peoples groups, and then sharing with us the ways forward. I think that's super helpful for us. And you mentioned about gender-specific grievance redress mechanisms, among other things. So thank you for that. We've been working on with under the leadership of Sang and her team. We have heard 3 cases. We have 3 more to go with different flavor. Next, we'll talk about climate finance. But at this midpoint, I would like to encourage you to send questions. I don't know if you've been typing while you're listening. So have you sent in any questions or voted so far? Can the organizers put the QR code up there again? Yeah, it's up there. Okay, great. Okay, so this is a way that you can make sure you've come here all the way. You have many things to do. You're investing time. Let's make sure that most burning questions answered, or you can get some input from this this really diverse and the panel with depth experience. So please send that in. We did this 3 weeks ago with the International Skills Forum. So the education sector colleagues were super active, and we got many votes on that. So let's make sure that happens again. Oh, good. So we're seeing questions already. So let's save that. Oh, we already have one specific for Ibu Filda. Okay, so let's go to Dr. Nina Kolibash-Kina. She's a senior social development specialist at the CIF, the Climate Investment Funds, coming all the way from DC, hopping around Asia, I understand. She has extensive experience in development with focus on social inclusion and gender, labor, rural development, water management and resilience. She joined the World Bank 2015 and led various policy dialogues, analytical work on developing gender and citizen engagement activities in agriculture, water, and energy sectors. So she will share with us a case on examples leveraging climate finance for women leadership. Over to you.
Thank you so much. It's on. It is really a great pleasure to be participating in this event on the carbon impact. Just a disclaimer that I've been in the region now for 2.5 weeks, a lot of different meetings in a couple of countries. I didn't fly from DC just for the event. Climate investment funds is a form of a trust fund. We receive funding from bilateral donors and we channel it through the multilateral development banks. And we're very proud that we've been working with ADB for the last 15 years from the beginning of our work, and some of the most innovative work both on energy transition and gender. We had a chance to contribute a little bit to that. We also work, we pride ourselves, there are several unique features of our business model. We work on a programmatic country-based approach. So when we work in a specific country, we bring several MDs together with the national stakeholders to develop not just a specific project, but look at a number of different projects, how they come together as a program. And in all of that, gender empowerment, social inclusion is really mainstreamed both through our funding criteria, but also through specific dedicated co-benefits. And of course, again, the MDBs have been evolving and developing really innovative practices. So we do have some track record on gender, but we've also recently realized it's not enough for projects to be gender responsive. It's not enough to do gender mainstreaming. We don't see enough women leaders. And if I can have the next slide, please. So part of our work as an climate investment, obviously finance is one pillar of our work, but the second and no less important pillar is really knowledge and advocacy work. And we also see part of our job is to push our MDB partners even further than they would go otherwise to bring innovation. In that spirit, just a few months ago, we've developed in collaboration with gender focal points from MDB, a framework on harnessing climate finance for women climate leadership, where we've first of all tried to take a stock of the gaps. And despite amazing developments at all sectors, and today different numbers were used, we still can see that there are gaps from women represented at COP, at national policy making, still making their ways to the boardrooms, and civil society organizations not fully at the table. At the same time, and in our knowledge product, we also picked up a number of interesting evidence that demonstrates that gender inclusion of women is not just a normative good thing to do, but it actually is a good business and it has a lot of efficiency. There is evidence that shows that when women participate in national policy making, the resultant policies are more focused on climate. At the local level, when women participate in natural resource governance and conservation efforts, the results are better. At the same time, in the market, there are some studies that show that companies that have women representation at all levels of management end up with higher profits. So definitely there is a case. But it's not for the lack of wanting of women to become leaders. And a second part of our framework and of our knowledge product really looks systematically at various barriers that women face, both internally and we have some social capital, human capital issues, but also the legal and policy frameworks, and there are other measures that need to be addressed in order for women to have more space for leadership. So this is a bit conceptual, and how do we apply this in practice? If I can have my next slide, please. One of the programs, one of the most recent programs that CIF launched 2 years ago is Accelerated Coal Transitions Program. And in the region, it targets Indonesia, but also Philippines, and we're work starting in India. For Indonesia, a year ago, we've already launched the overall investment plans, and now ADB and World Bank independently are working on specific projects. For Philippines, just last week, the investment plan was approved, so work is starting. And within this comprehensive approach on looking at governance aspects, but then people and communities and infrastructure in the context of coal transition, we worked on ensuring that to all of the overall outcomes of the program, we have gender-specific outcomes. On governance, it's about increased influence of women-led groups and CSOs, applying gender lens in transition policies. On people and communities, it's really gender equality and retention and redeployment, but also regeneration programs. And then also looking at infrastructure and a private sector-led component as well. Can have the next slide, please. So in addition to generally looking at all the investment projects under the program and ensuring that gender is mainstreamed, we also received some dedicated funding from Canada for women-led coal transition grant mechanism, WOLCOT. And the vision here is really to find ways going outside of the business as usual of MDBs to fund more directly women-led organizations. And this part is still work in progress, where we look at opportunities to support women groups, and we have a two-pillar approach. I'm still waiting for my next slide, where it's really both looking downstream to work with the local communities. But more importantly, and I think if we look at women programs, very often it's either or. It's either really working on the community level and supporting the CSOs and supporting some specific initiatives, or national policy making. So we're trying to, with our WOLCOT grant mechanism, to create a bridge between the two elements. Our work is more advanced in Indonesia, where we've just been drafting a white paper on entry points for women leadership in energy transition. And today, the JETP Secretariat is launching the comprehensive investment plan for the broader JETP. So we're in discussion with them how one of the first initiatives post the overall plan could be a national level workshop engaging really systematically on the subject, both looking for very small initiatives all the way up to the national policy making. I think I've run out of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nina, for sharing that. We've been working very closely on the Indonesia JETP and Philippine JETP investment plans, and having an anchor such as yourself, really comprehensive view on inclusion and gender empowerment in the CIF, making sure that the funding allocated is definitely used for the people sort of pillars, elements, just transition. It's been very helpful, and we've seen the difference in the country. So thank you for sharing that. Look forward to future iterations and also implementation of this walkout, and maybe we can update this group in the coming years. Okay, so we're going to move to youth. We have two speakers. One is on really current initiatives on youth social entrepreneurship. So we have Ms. Simarna Singh. She's a social entrepreneur, sustainability advocate, youth leader for the National Youth Council of Singapore. She's also the founder of Coco Vida, a social enterprise. She was previously UN Global Compact Youth Ambassador, and also joined the Masdar's Future Sustainability Leaders Program. So she will share with us a case on youth catalyzing change in the context of green entrepreneurship and beyond. Please, over to you.
I hope you don't mind that I'm standing. I think I just need extra blood flow, you know, just a youth touch. Okay. All right, could I please request for the timer, please? Sorry, previous slide, please. All right, good morning, everybody. Given that we're in Manila, allow me to greet you with a warm mabuhay. First and foremost, thank you so much, ADB, the National Youth Council, Singapore government, really, for the opportunity to be here today. To briefly introduce myself, my name is Simarna Singh. My agenda in these 5 to 6 minutes, I assure you, is quite a bit. So I hope that I'll be able to match the time. But of course, really my goal is to share my country's net zero climate ambitions. And as a youth, obviously, how we're catalyzing change. And last but not least, how policy actually affects social enterprises like Coco Vida. I know today's discussion is more on energy transition and obviously gender responsiveness. My perspective is a little bit different, which is that for sustainability and impact to actually take place, we need 3 dimensions and the intersection of each, which is people, planet, and economic viability. All right, so let me quickly get started with my slide on the screen. I'm not going to be able to touch upon all of these points, apologies in advance. But to start off with, Singapore as a nation, we make up 0.1% of emissions. And this on its own, quite transparently, is nothing that is going to really shift the needle per se. But what we are a strong believer as a country is collaborations. We believe that we cannot do everything alone. So we've actually showcased this on national stages. So for example, at COP this year, alongside our counterpart Norway, we're actually going to be co-facilitating Article 6 negotiations. We're going to be actually showcasing, Article 6 negotiations, and previously as well, sorry, apologies, give me a minute to correct myself, negotiations on mitigations, and in COP26 and COP27, we also went ahead with obviously Article 6 negotiations. And last but not least, we believe that we can tap on each other's opportunities. Most importantly, as a country, we have actually implemented the carbon tax. We're the first Southeast Asian country to actually implement this both locally and for the region. The carbon tax is actually at $5 per ton, and it's now going to be increased at $50 per ton to $80 per ton by 2030. This really showcases our decarbonization journey and the shift towards a greener economy. So youth, as you can see, is mentioned under each of these pillars, right? You must be wondering why youth is actually mentioned multiple times. And the reason is quite simple. As a government, our country actually wants to receive the feedback from us as a generation. We want to understand how we can work together and obviously strengthen the ecosystem as well. And so I'm grateful to share that I'll be attending COP28 next week in Dubai as part of the Climate Development Program organized by the Singapore government, where they have upskilled 40 youths, including myself, with the green skills that we need to impede the climate challenges that we face. And last but not least, I'd just like to touch upon the last component on really financing and future establishment of obviously taxonomies. Today it's quite challenging to obviously, I mean, as I guess consumers, you can recognize greenwashing, right? But there are limited or not as much taxonomies that are available today. And so as a country, we're actually taking the lead forward on this front. All right, so that's quite a bit of information. I mean, for any entrepreneurs, social enterprises in the room today, I think I'd like to connect the dots a little bit. So if I could move to the next slide a little bit, but I'm not going to play the video just as yet. I'm obviously a social entrepreneur, and we have, I guess, different challenges and different opportunities that we have. But from all of the policies that I've quickly touched upon, and really, I guess we're most affected when it comes to perhaps taxonomies, right? And how we're going to be charged for green products moving forward. But as a company, we actually started off our energy consumption minimally at the very start of our journey. No water in any of our body washes. I mean, it's kind of unheard of, you know, and most importantly, obviously aligning with the SDGs at the start of 2015. Again, very, very few social enterprises have done such work. Financial implications also a very important factor for us as a company with relation to obviously getting support and enhancing and growing. Previously, we were a B2B exporter before COVID-19. And since the pandemic, we've actually tried to shift to B2C. With the National Youth Council, we've actually got the opportunity of having 3 youth trainees who have given us this fund. And that really helps us to amplify our impact, digitize, and obviously scale. So without further ado, I'm going to play myself on the video for you to understand what we're doing as a social enterprise and obviously connect the dots all together. Thank you so much.
There we go.
Kokaveda is a Singapore social enterprise. We manufacture handmade, sustainable, and vegan health and wellness consumer products. Our entire range is predominantly made from the virgin coconut oil, plant-based extracts, and essential oils. We are proud to share that everything is handcrafted by a 100% women operations team who we upskill and train. It gives me utmost pride to be able to empower them and make a significant difference in their lives. As a social enterprise, our mission is to accelerate social impact. And we embed the Sustainable Development Goals and Singapore's Green Plan within our business model. We believe it is important to be mindful of our resources, and we have eliminated water from our entire manufacturing process. This extends the life cycle of our packaging, reduces our carbon footprint in logistics, and gives our consumers long-lasting, affordable, and clean, sustainable products.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I might try to stand up to pretend to be young, but thanks so much. I did used to be involved in the world's largest youth organization back in the days. I wish I was so eloquent as you are, but thank you for sharing that and a real example in entrepreneurship. It's really amazing what you've been doing, and look forward to seeing you in Dubai next week. We have our last panel member, the 6th case study. I hope, Rosemary, you can hear us. You're there? Great, yeah, we can see you. Yes, excellent. Ms. Rosemary Idem is Program Manager for Gender and Youth at Sustainable Energy for All. Who knows Sustainable Energy for All? Okay. Well, for those of you, this is an opportunity to learn about it. It's been going on for many years, I think more like 15 years, been involved as well. Great examples of local involvement, women, indigenous peoples, communities. So we're going to look forward to hearing from Rosemary, but particularly on the next generation of women and youth leaders. So she will share with us a case focusing on that, on climate change policy and diplomacy. Over to you, Rosemary.
Thank you, Toru. Fortunately, I can stand. I hope you can still hear me.
Clear.
Great. To give a bit of background about what we do, I work with Sustainable Energy for All. We are an international organization that mobilizes action through commitments, providing resources, designing targeted programs and initiatives towards the achievement of SDG 7 in alignment with the Paris Agreement. So for the context of this event, one of the key things we do is put women and youth at the heart of what we do. And we do this by enhancing opportunities for women in the energy workforce while supporting and championing the next generation of energy leaders. So I would focus on 3 key pillars of what we do. One being advocacy, mainstreaming, and professional development. Starting with advocacy, our goal here is to build global momentum for women and young people to participate meaningfully in the global forum and through coalition building. One of the key things we are doing in the context of clean energy transition is we have developed a program which we kickstarted this year called the SDG 7 Global Youth Ambassadors. This program is designed to build movement and mobilize action towards a global, just and equitable energy transition. So here, the key objective of the program is to equip young people in different regions with communication tools and the platform needed to enable them inspire their peers and in their regions, and also advance the achievement of energy, climate, and development goals. So we provide them with tools and training to refine their ability to inspire and build youth movements on the ground where they come from. We provide them with access to networking opportunities for peer-to-peer learning and sharing best practices. And also another key goal here is to also increase the geographic spread and representation of young people in the space. And finally, we also try to equip them with the knowledge and access to global platforms to have meaningful representation of young people in policy dialogue. For our first cohort, we selected 5 amazing young people from 5 different regions, which are Middle East and North Africa, Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America, and small island states. These young people are already hitting the ground running, building momentum in their regions, and have been actually developing and implementing impactful programs. Some are actually even working with universities to build curricula around emerging topics like energy efficiency, sustainable cooling. And this is because they have been equipped with the right tools to be able to not just tell their stories, but also highlight opportunities and highlight the impact of energy and climate in the places where they come from. Another key area I wanted to highlight is in mainstreaming. And I think sometimes people use the word a lot, but for me, a key example I'm actually excited to share is that we've been working with, as SE4O, we've been working with a range of countries to develop their energy transition and investment plans. And our approach to this is the whole ecosystem approach, looking at the entire economy with the countries to help them develop the clean energy pathway. So we work with data from macro factors like GDP, population, and also looking at maybe hard to abate areas. There are energy sources, the different sectors like building, roads, healthcare. And we see this as a unique opportunity for a gender and youth lens to be on the whole energy transition process to ensure that it's not a missed opportunity to ensure that women and youth are carried along in this process. So one of the key things we've done is looking at this data from the entire sector and distilling it to determine the talent pool that is required to meet these goals at the end of the day. So if a country is saying that they're looking at transitioning to net zero, for instance, in 2040, what is the talent pool required? What is the upskilling and reskilling required? Which sectors should the country be investing in? And we've been able to work with some of these countries to consult with all key sector players, because it's really important that when you're designing such programs, everyone is carried along. So from academia to civil society, to ensure that there's this country buy-in. And it's been quite amazing to see how the different stakeholders are working together to try to develop that pipeline of talent that will help the country achieve its net zero targets. So this is something we've been doing, for in particular in Barbados, and we're also working to do that in countries like Ghana and Kenya. A third area, which is also quite exciting, is professional development. Our approach here is looking at, one, how do we get young people into the sector, and how do you help or empower and equip those who are already in the sector to grow through the ranks. And I think one of the speakers spoke about the lack of diversity, particularly for women in leadership positions. For that to happen, there has to be that pipeline of talent that are able to enter the sector and are being retained in the sector. So I wanted to highlight there's a program we have called the Women in STEM Traineeship Program. This is an end-to-end process to train young women for direct employment. So on one end, we have been leveraging our in-country activities and using that as a platform to provide activity-based learnings for these young women. So we get these young trainees in the countries where we are active in, or where we are deploying or implementing a program. They sort of job shadow our team members and our stakeholders and learn on the job, and we complement that with soft skills like networking, leadership, communication, public speaking. And then at the end of the day, when they graduate, we are partnering with some key stakeholders who will help them or place them in great jobs. So this is like having an end-to-end process, employ people, train people for direct employment. This program is currently active in about 3 countries. For example, in Sierra Leone, we are working with some stakeholders to deploy energy systems for healthcare facilities. So we've had a cohort of young women who have been job shadowing the engineers and deploying the systems, from installing the PV panels to the batteries and inverters. In Ghana and Kenya, where we are working with the countries to develop their energy transition plans, these young women are currently working with the team, and they're building skills around energy modeling, energy efficiency, sustainable cooling. And it's really, really impactful to see that they now feel this sense of ownership, that they're contributing to something bigger than themselves. Another key program to highlight is one we call Open Africa Power, which we are implementing with stakeholders like NL Foundation. Again, this is targeting energy professionals who are already in the workforce. And the idea here is to give them training on issues like regulatory frameworks, business skills, to also help them advance in their careers. So I'll stop there for now, and I'm happy to answer anything you want to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary, for sharing that. I think your work on SDG 7 and providing that platform for the next generation of youth, that's super valuable. I remember being frustrated. I'm sure, Simona, you have this too, but being youth and talking about the planet and sustainable development, this is our issue. It's our future world. Can we be more involved in decision making? Can we have more funding access so our voices are heard? And yeah, so really appreciate Sustainability for providing that. And you mentioned about pipeline of talent. That's so important. Succession planning and making sure that we have a critical mass of future leaders, so we have much better gender representation at the higher levels of decision making. Really critical aspect. Okay, so I see many questions here. Thank you. And if you haven't sent your question or voted yet, please do so. It's supposed to show, can you see it on the screen? Can the audience also see that? The list of questions? Okay, there's one with 11 votes. So when we mention youth, how are they engaged? Are they mere beneficiaries of the programs, or are they part of the consultative and decision-making process? Why don't we go from Rosemary first online and then go to Samarna? Yeah. Rosemary, were you able to hear that question?
Yes. I'll try to tackle it this way. From our perspective, youth should not just be beneficiaries; they should be active participants, and it has to be meaningful. Because if you look at, for example, IRENA's latest report says about 42 million jobs will be created by 2050. Who is going to take on those jobs? So there's a need for targeted interventions now, and young people have to step up because I would like to tell them, like, no one's going to just give things to you. They have to step up and also utilize their skills, their knowledge, and contribute to the whole net zero agenda, because at the end of the day, you are the young people, you are the people who are going to take on these plans and help us save the future. So I'll leave it at that.
Yep, thanks very much, Rosemary. I'm going to ask Samarna to take that question and also the one specifically to you at the bottom. Thanks for your boldness. Please share barriers, traditional norms observed in your space.
Yeah, thanks so much for the questions. I think I'm going to start off with something super cliche from a Spider-Man movie because I love this quote so much, which is, "With great power comes great responsibility." And honestly, it sounds cliche, right? But it is actually very, very applicable. So I'll speak from two folds. One is obviously as one of the youth who is partaking in the government programs from Singapore, and I think a second as a social entrepreneur. So from the first fold government perspective, I think our government really recognizes that our youth wants to be more involved in decision making, whether that's on sustainability or the future policies that will then affect us. We are also an aging population. There is no secret there, right? And I think it's fair to say that we really need to prepare our younger generation to really take this forward. So the first thing that our government is doing is just recently they have announced the youth panels where they're actually integrating our youth in circles, discussing obviously future policies that would affect them, as well as taking in their suggestions, potentially integrating them into research, leading projects as well. So I'm super proud to share that. That's from a government perspective. Secondly, as a social enterprise, obviously the video touched a lot on women and obviously the farmer cooperatives. But from a youth perspective, we actually wanted to upskill our youth with more digital skills and obviously integrating social impact, specifically how to quantify the theory of change. And obviously understand really how that actually integrates back into the farmers' lives and the women's lives and how you quantify each section. So for example, as we scale in volume, we hire more women. There is no machinery at Cocoveda. We will make sure that we buy more virgin coconut oil, the produce from the farmer cooperatives. So really, I think teaching and upskilling them with that, and obviously the e-commerce side of things and social media and increasing in sales, I think is fantastic exposure. So I think that kind of touches a little bit on both the questions. I kind of summarized both of them together.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. Maybe we can ask about Indonesia's case. So what about the youth voices? I think Indonesia actually by law requires 20% of the budget to be spent on education. There's a fantastic education program investing in youth, next generation, but is there involvement in the decision-making process? And also, Ibu Filda, there's a very specific question to you. So combining with that, with these crucial gaps in policy research, gender energy transition, and those requiring immediate attention, if you can cover those two questions, please.
Thank you. So first of all, the situation in Indonesia right now regarding to the youth and education, you mentioned about 20% of the budget. Currently, right now, we have a transformative curriculum actually, which is called Merdeka Belajar. From the Ministry of the Education right now, since the current minister is appointed in this presidential period. So the thing is that the Merdeka Belajar means that there is a transformative curriculum that is needed for to be adapted to the current changing rapid transition right now, including the energy transition. So meaning like the students from the arts faculty or somewhat, they can have a one what is it called, one lesson from the maybe in the engineering to learn about the energy transitions right now. And the second thing is that because I'm the board of the petroleum engineering in one of the university in Indonesia, they also have a difficulties on adapting to this energy transition. So what they do is that they will transform not into like focusing on the petroleum curriculum, but they are going to transform to more to the energy side. So how to make the petroleum industry to be more environmental friendly. We have many ways to do that, but that means that we need advanced technology and also money investment. So anyway, we are right now in Indonesia, we are preparing the youth generation to be more adaptive to this energy transition right now. And the second part is about the what is it that
The gaps in research.
Yeah, there's a lot of crucial gaps actually right now, but we need to understand about the decision making from maybe the top level to the bottom or the bottom level to the top level. But in regards for the policy, I think I see that there's a problem with the implementation right now, the policy implementation. We understand that the Asian member states already aware about this gender responsiveness into the energy transition, but it's about the implementation itself. So I think because my case study is about the Asian member states countries should have a coherence of the policy in terms of the gender responsive strategies that needs to be defined as a one region in the Asian countries. And the second one is that the monitoring and evaluation. If you have implemented, then you need to monitor and evaluate. It's a repeated cycle that needs to do to make the program successfully in the future. So because right now the documents reviewed are not binding, so there's a room to have this suitable mechanisms to report the progress. And again, I'm very happy because the Ministry of the State-Owned Enterprise will increase 50% for women. We will monitor that, me and my team here. So actually, it's a really a good initiative, and I think I'm very optimistic about that. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Ibu Filda. I'm going to go to Ibu Kamya, leading sort of from that. But Veronica was listening very carefully on your advice on the gaps, the policy on gender involvement, empowerment in the context of energy transition. So maybe Ibu Kamya, you see the question here on the screen, Ibu Kamya, but also maybe you can touch on the state-owned enterprise minister's commitment on increasing women leadership by 50%, how that's going in PLN as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. Regarding the MOAC commitment, actually, it is not, I mean, the number is new, but the commitment from the SOE is actually not new. So PLN itself, as one of the SOE, already obligated to put one of our key performance indicators to put women as a certain percentage of women nominated talent to become like the directors of SOE. So for example, PLN currently have around 9 women nominated talent that will become one of directors in SOE, not only PLN, but could also be in other SOEs. So there are some standards put by the Ministry of SOE from the Ministry of SOE to make sure that women also have the same STEM opportunities And we also give a training as part of this process from PLN to make sure that we can go through this nominated talent. And last year, actually, one of our talent become a director in one of holding company of SOE, which is the BKI, and we are very proud that one of PLN's women talent become the directors in this quite huge SOE. And I think I also got questions on from Ibu Veronica on the how is the advice for power utilities on fostering diversity. I think this should be start from the commitment from the top. So our CEO and our BOD really put a commitment on ESG and also on gender. We have twice a year of Sustainability Day. And for this year, one of the topic or the focus of the Sustainability Day is actually on gender. And we also very delight to invite ADBs also on this forum as one of our keynote speakers. And after our BOD have this commitment, of course, it is quite easy to cascade these commitments into our PLN groups throughout Indonesia.
Great, thank you
I hope this
so
answered
much,
the question.
Ibu Kamya. Yes, and the examples you shared, we're very proud of PLN managers moving up to head the bigger SOEs. We are running out of time, and the organizers are showing sort of red cards in front of us, but we have so many questions, and I'm sure we can answer some of them offline, but I would like to touch on, so Robbie, that is the next popular question. So what major challenges do you anticipate in promoting active involvement of indigenous peoples in energy transition? Maybe just briefly, sorry, but if you can share with us what you see coming ahead, and I think Nina on maybe private sector mobilization on financing part. So if we can get 2 comments on those and then wrap up the session. Robbie?
Yeah, so the big challenge that we're facing right now in relation to our active participation in the transition is a lack of recognition of our rights. In the Philippines, we have the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, but the implementation of it is quite, weak, no? So it's not just legal recognition, but really giving us a space to decide on the development that we want. We are not just beneficiaries. We are also actors in development. We contribute a lot to sustainable development, and that has to be recognized. And also, we have our own development priorities. And what we seek is that the transition has to be aligned to the development that we want as indigenous people. So in terms of ensuring a culturally appropriate energy transition, actually in the work that we do, 10% is only on technology, 90% of that is community organizing, and that is more long-term. Not only giving the necessary capacity to indigenous communities, but also guiding them through being able to govern not only the technology, renewable energy technology, but also their community and their territory as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robbie. That part on small bit being technology and more on implementation is such an important point. It's not the technology innovation, it's actually the way you use it and local context. Yeah. Maybe if we can have last comment from Nina on financing and mobilizing private sector.
Thank you so much. No, I think financing is the most important question for promoting gender equality, and it's about mobilizing dedicated finance for gender work, but also gendering the big finance flows, which is very important. And I think here, as SIF, we have a bit of a unique vantage point, because with NGVs, the work is like really targeted to specific investment projects, and it is very important. And very often you find out that there is no one there to bring different stakeholders together. Nobody has the mandate, nobody has the resources for it, even though everyone is committed to it. So I think what we're trying to pilot in Indonesia and then do in other countries as well is to really spend some time bringing different government, but also private sector stakeholders, with private sector as well, not pushing the gender inclusion from normative agenda, but more seeing, well, how it could be profitable, both for private sector companies to mobilize mobilize more finance by targeting gender bonds or ESG as a requirement in those investors that are interested in seeing those results. So trying to find for different stakeholders, what would be the selling points for them, and then putting it in one framework, and then working using such platform as ADB, World Bank, but working with the UN to also lift, for example, the role of the gender ministry in the conversation on energy transition. Usually those are separate conversations, a conversation on gender and one on energy, but really continuing to push and bring them together. Thank you so much.
Sorry, am I allowed to add like 30 seconds?
Yes, please. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah,
Okay.
that connects so well with Smarna, what you're doing. So please.
Just from a Singapore standpoint as well, you know, as a global financial hub, MAS is actually taking about 2% of its portfolio really into, and that's equivalent to about 6 billion really, to a climate transition program. So that's in progress, so stay tuned for that. And I think another way that we're helping the private sector, specifically as well as startups, because I know there was a follow-up question on that, is the Singapore Eco Fund. And I think that's also something to look into, and happy to chat more after the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that on the ecosystem of nurturing entrepreneurship. Yeah. All right, so I'm not going to try to summarize that session. Such an extensive, broad, deep panel, and please do follow up. I hope you won't run away after this to the panelists, but I'm going to hand it to Veronica to summarize or wrap it up and guide us to lunch. Please, Veronica.
Thank you, Toru. Thank you to the speakers, to the presenters. It has been a fantastic session. I won't stand between you and lunch, so I have only one ask for you. If you have your Slido, go to the poll and tell us the one thing that you take from this session this morning. And I hope you have enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Round of applause to the panelists, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was really interesting.
All right, just a couple of housekeeping items before we all go out. Thank you so much, first of all, to our amazing presenters who are really championing and walking the talk. And thank you, Toru-san. So lunch will be served on the second floor. If you exit through this door, it will and go up the spiral staircase in the executive dining room. We will be coming back here at 1:30. We have an exciting line of speakers and discussion.